Okay, good morning, children, all of you. 10th class student. Let us complete our chapter that is Nationalism in India. Is that clear? Nationalism in India, we had done about non-cooperation movement, how different groups reacted to it. Then we had done about towards civil disobedience movement, where we had discussed the condition which developed in 1930s, about Simon Commission and the Great Economic Depression. Then we had decided that Mahatma Gandhi is going to launch a civil disobedience movement with the initiation of Dandi March. Then we had also done about how the various groups participated in this movement. That is the rich peasants, the poor peasantry, the industrialists, the workers, and lastly the women. Now we are going to talk about the limitations of civil disobedience movement. When we talk of the limitations of civil disobedience movement, we mean the weaknesses of civil disobedience movement. That is, what was the disadvantages of civil disobedience movement, which all groups did not participate in the civil disobedience movement and why. Here we are going to study about two particular groups. One is the depressed classes or the Dalits, and the second is Muslims. Let us first talk about the untouchables or the depressed classes. Now, untouchability was very much rampant in our society. Untouchables, they called themselves as Dalits or the depressed or the oppressed classes. Okay, and they never participated in the civil disobedience movement. Congress also was reluctant to include the depressed classes into this movement. Why? Because it felt that it is going to offend the high caste Hindus, that is the Sanatanis. On the other hand, Mahatma Gandhi, he declared that Swaraj would not come for 100 years if untouchability is not removed from our country. He considered untouchability as a sin. In fact, he called the untouchables as Harijan, that is children of God. Children of God, he organized satyagraha to allow them entry into the temples in the public places for wells, roads, tanks, schools, etc. Okay, he also did all kind of menial job, that is the work of bhangi, also what you say, menial jobs, and to set up an example of dignity of labor. Okay, and he also persuaded the upper caste to give up this sin of untouchability. Now, Dalits, on the other hand, they started organizing themselves into separate groups, and they demanded that they should have reserved seats, and or they should not have reserved seats, but they should have separate electorates. Okay, and they should also have reserved seats in educational institutions plus separate electorates. Separate elections should be done for them. Okay, because they believe that if politically they are empowered, if they get some kind of power politically, their condition and their problems can be solved. This is what was their thinking. This particular group was quite strong in Maharashtra as well as Nagpur region, and all of the depressed classes, they were organized into depressed classes association by B.R. Ambedkar. And this person, B.R. Ambedkar, he directly clashed with Mahatma Gandhi during the second roundtable conference in London, where he demanded separate electorates. Mahatma Gandhi was greatly disappointed and he returned. We know it very well that he returned disheartened, he returned to India. Okay, and why? Because he saw that in the second roundtable conference we Indians were fighting among ourselves only. Okay, Gandhiji now, when he came back to India, then Britishers were ready to give up, to agree to the demands of B.R. Ambedkar, that is they are going to get separate electorates. This was also the time that Mahatma Gandhi was in Yerwada jail, and when he heard that the Britishers had agreed to the demands of B.R. Ambedkar, he took a fast unto death. All the leaders, they got very much worried and they went to B.R. Ambedkar, and they asked him that you please give up this demand of separate electorates. B.R. Ambedkar agreed that he is going to accept Gandhiji's demand, and the result was Pune Pact of September 1932. It gave the depressed classes reserved seats in the provincial and the legislative councils, and they were supposed to be voted by general electorate only. Okay, so this is all about depressed classes and how Congress reacted and what Gandhiji felt and how B.R. Ambedkar organized or gave up his demand. Next, we are going to talk of Muslims. When we talk of Muslims, then Muslims did not actively participated in the civil disobedience movement. Why? The first and foremost reason was the failure of the non-cooperation Khilafat movement. And Muslims felt alienated with Congress, and they considered it that it was a Hindu religious nationalist group, just like the Hindu Mahasabha. Relations between Hindus and Muslims continuously got strained. Why? It got worsened because communal clashes and riots were common in our country. And the more the clashes and the riots were there, it deepened the distance between Hindus and Muslims. Congress and Muslim League, they agreed to some kind of agreement. They were willing to come together in 1927. And the main differences between the two parties was over representation. Okay, that is how many seats will Muslims will be getting in the areas where Muslims are in majority. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was a very important leader of Muslim League, he was willing to give up the demand of separate electorates. He said that they can participate in the general electorate only if they are assured of reserved seats in the central and the provincial councils. But but all hope of unity came to an end in 1928 when Hindu Mahasabha leader M.R. Jaikar he directly clashed with Muslim League's leader. And and when civil disobedience movement was launched, there was an atmosphere of suspicions and distrust between Hindus and Muslims. Many Muslim leaders and intellectuals they felt that their culture, their identity, it is going to be submerged in a Hindu majority nation. So they never participated in the civil disobedience movement and they remained aloof. Is that clear? Next, the last part we are going to talk of is the sense of collective belonging. When we talk of the sense of collective belonging, we are going to study that how the French created a sense of collective belonging in the nationalism in Europe. Similarly, here we are going to talk about when we were fighting for independence, when we were uniting, how we created a sense of collective belonging, how we created a bond of unity among ourselves. Okay, we all know it very well that collective belonging does not only come through united struggle, it also comes because of lot many other things like fictions, like folklores, like songs, popular prints, symbols. They all play a very important part in bringing unity in the country. The identity of the nation, just like it was Germania in Germany and Marion in France, similarly in our country also, images came up, and these images they were visually associated as Bharat Mata. It was first created by Bankim Chand Chattopadhyay, who wrote Vande Matram also in 1870. This Vande Matram means a hymn to motherland, which this song was included in his book Anand Mat, and it was widely sung during the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. When Bengal was partitioned, it was sung a lot in 1905. Okay, so this was the first effort was being done by Bankim Chand Chattopadhyay by creating the image of Bharat Mata. Second is Abindranath Tagore. He painted the famous image again of Bharat Mata only, and here this time she was portrayed as an ascetic figure who was calm, composed, and divine and spiritual. And in subsequent years, we find that number of Bharat Mata images came up. Some like goddesses, some like just like a lady standing next to a lion or something like this. Okay, so this is all about Bharat Mata. Next, we are going to talk of ideas of nationalism. It also developed through Indian folk lore. Folklore means folk stories were collected. Nationalists, they recorded folk tales which was sung by bards. Bards were the people who used to roam from villages to villages. Rabindranath Tagore, he began collecting ballads, nursery rhymes, and myths also in Bengal. Similarly, in Madras, there was another person who was known as Nathesa Shastri. He also published a massive collection of folk tales, that is, the folk tales of southern India. Nationalist leaders, on the other hand, they became aware of icons and symbols. That is, it can unify the people. Say, for example, in Bengal, when the Swadeshi movement was going on, a tricolor flag was designed. Designed, which was having 8 lotuses, which represented the 8 provinces of a country, and a crescent moon, which showed Hindus and Muslims' unity. Is that clear? Okay. Next is in 1921, the same flag was redesigned by Mahatma Gandhi as Swaraj flag. Then this time the flag was a tricolor again with a spinning wheel in the center. Now the next effort, the next step which was taken for creating a sense of collective belonging was another way of creating nationalism was reinterpretation of history. Britishers, they considered India as backward, primitive and uncivilized. On the other hand, Indians were not interested in this kind of concept of the Britishers. They believed that India once upon a time was highly flourishing. It had great achievement. It had a glorious past and glorious development in architecture, science, maths, religion, culture, law, philosophy, crafts, etc. And this glorious time was followed by a period of decline when India was colonized. Okay, so their effort was a reinterpretation of history. Now, however, when we Hindus celebrated our Hindus festival to create a unity, say for example, Tilak celebrated Ganesh Chaturthi and another kind of festivals in Maharashtra. Similarly, Muslims also celebrated their own festivals. This further strained the relationship between Hindus and Muslims. Okay, next we let us talk about the conclusion. Then we all know that the two we were continuously seething with anger against the colonial government, and when we were being repressed by them, when we were being oppressed by them, it was bringing us together. Congress, under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, channelized people grievances into an organized movement. But this was not without lot of problems. This was not without any kind of problem. Lot of diverse groups and classes were there who had their own aspirations and their own expectations. Freedom meant different things to these different people, and Congress continuously strive to bring everybody together and to try to fulfill the demands of different groups. However, this national unity which came forward, it was not without conflict. There was always inner conflict in our country. Is that clear? Okay, now children, this completes your chapter. This completes your chapter of nationalism in India. Okay, please read the chapter carefully, and in the next class please be ready with a pencil, okay, as well as your books. I'm going to make you all marks so that you all can write down the notes on your own. If by chance there is any say for example any kind of misunderstanding, or you can always refer to the book and use your own discretion while marking it. Okay children, please read the chapter carefully. If you have any problem, then maybe on Saturday we'll be having a doubt class, and that time you can ask me. Okay.